joining us from that conference. So, Oli, what is the main focus here of this particular conference? Is it really about fact-finding and analysis, or are they seeking specific solutions that are targeted at specific species that are endangered?
Well, they are targeting specific solutions, but here at this particular conference, the emphasis is really on the money trail that flows from the illegal wildlife trade. The UK government believes that if you can get on top of that flow of money that comes out of poaching and trafficking and all of those illegal products, then you can make a big dent in the illegal wildlife trade around the world. Clearly a huge focus here as well on the hundreds of species that experts here say are endangered as a result of the illegal wildlife trade. But Britain and the other attending countries believe that if they can coordinate to try and crack down on the flows of illicit money that come out of the wildlife trade around the world, then they will be able to make a significant dent in it. There are as many as 80 countries represented here today, and the British government believes that if you have that international coordination and cooperation, you stand a much better chance of getting on top of this issue.
So is there some kind of consensus in as far as which one of these species that are, that can legitimately be called endangered, or do we go by the guidelines of CITES, the International Convention on Trade in Endangered Species? I guess you know why I'm asking, because in some instances you'll have one country saying, hey, whaling is sort of diminishing the number of whales that are available, yet another country will not necessarily see it that way.
Yeah, quite right. And, you have various species which are being mentioned here regularly, like the African rhino, the African elephant, which some countries, some African countries, say that actually they've made a huge amount of progress in terms of cutting down the numbers of those animals being killed illegally. So, yes, that is part of the discussion here. The pangolin keeps being mentioned as one of the species that is particularly under threat at the moment around the world. And as well as those flows of money that countries here want to get on top of. Of course, the other end of that equation is cracking down on demand for these products in parts of the world where they are sought after for medicinal or cultural reasons, whatever it may be. So certainly all of these countries have different methodologies which are sometimes in use. They have perhaps different theories about exactly what to do, but it does seem to be here quite a lot of common ground in terms of how these countries can come together and cooperate. UK aid, for example, is being upped in terms of Africa, in the way that it is going to flow now towards training teams in various countries about how to crack down on poaching in the first place, but also in terms of trying to do things like freeze assets of people who are involved in the illegal wildlife trade to make it much harder for them to operate. So different methodologies, yes, some different theories and some different feelings about which species need to be concentrated on, but at the same time a reasonable amount of common ground as well.
So I imagine then, Oli, that a lot of the focus would be on the activities of law enforcement, beefing up law enforcement, but also forensics in terms of following that money trail. Is there participation by international law enforcement organizations there?
Yeah, there does appear to be buy-in in that regard. There's also a lot of talk here about data, about using modern data techniques to actually track some of the species we're talking about to get a better idea, a much more realistic idea of exactly the numbers of animals that we're talking about, where they are, how they're moving, how under threat they actually are. There's a lot of criticism for events like this, that there can be talking shops, that not much action comes out of them. We've just been speaking, though, ENCA, to the South African minister who is here representing the country, Mr. Anakom, of course the tourism minister, but acting in that environment role at the moment as well. And he's been telling us that it isn't a talking shop, that actually some of these events, and this is one of the most recent that we've had a series of across the world, that actually a lot of good has already come out of them. He's been telling us that huge progress has been made when it comes to things like the African rhino, the African elephant, as a result of some of the practices discussed at these previous conferences. So those allegations of it being a talking shop will continue to be levelled at this event and events like it. But as I say, the South African minister here insisting that they're very useful indeed.
All right, thank you so much for that update. That's ENCA's Oli Barrett out in the United Kingdom for us following that conference.